welcome Tonya Khoury, who is the director at Acumen Media. She has been at the forefront of media monitoring and evaluating for some time. She is somewhat a pioneer and leader in her field and able to provide true value to brands with her resource and analytics. So in today's class, Acumen Media has studied the big four banks and measured them against Capitec, and the results are startling. Capitec is not only the biggest voice amongst these banks, but it swallows many of the big banks by volume. This session will highlight the results of the research by Acumen Media. You're welcome to get involved, ask questions in the chat, and we can always put that forward. And also at the end of the session, I will be posting a feedback form if you wouldn't mind taking the feedback form link, if you wouldn't mind just completing that. Thank you so much. Tonya, over to you.
Thank you, Belinda. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. As Val said, we're looking at a study today that is called Loose Change to Graceland, an Acumen Media presentation, and this is about the big banks in our country. Not all of them. We've taken a select few, maybe 5 in total, I believe. And we tried to work out what it is that made Capitec so large against other banks. Now, I've read some notes across the period. I've also done a little bit of research about Capitec as an organization. And this particular article from Business Tech sort of sums up how Capitec went from loose change to Graceland. So the bank as a brand prides itself on serving its clients with the most simplistic way of banking, saving the consumer both time and money. In the last year, the bank further increased its service offering and has since attracted an extensive range of customers across various income groups. This multi-pronged effect method Capitec used to market tech and sell and counsel its clients, showing that it focused only on pushing and selling products, and rather it wanted to be the game changer. I think in a word or in a sentence, people use this term, the unbanked. And I think what Capitec did very well is they managed to bank a large portion of those people that didn't have bank accounts or never used banking in the past. And it was a multi-pronged approach. Like in the beginning, they started with 0 fees, etc., and then they only did savings accounts really in the beginning. They then since moved and they do short-term loans, but they don't do things like home loans, they don't do car loans, they don't do anything like that the other big banks do. And that pushed me even more to understand, well, okay, you don't even have the large product offering that these other big banks do, but yet your volume is so huge. If we look at Capitec as a performer, it has over 15 million banking consumers. That is an enormous number. And 8.7 million of them are on digital. So another very big number. There was a study by Brand Finance that pulls out a global 500 banking report once a year. And they said that Capitec is the most valuable bank in South Africa, bar none. And 3rd in the world. Now that's a big statement. And I was like, wow, let's go and have a look more at what that means. There was also a consulta poll that said, where they actually looked at customers. So they actually had one-on-ones with customers. And overall, Capitec's satisfaction score was better than everybody else's and came in at 84.7%. Like, man, I mean, 84.7% for a bank is pretty high, you know? I don't have a great passion for my bank, but it seemed to me, according to these messages, that people have a passion for Capitec. So being in the industry quite a while, the first thing I know about banking is they're really heavily involved. Banks are heavily involved in sponsorship. I mean, we saw Absa with the PSL. It's now Netbank that's with the PSL. Absa does the Cape Epic. They even sponsored Tuck Stadium. And then FNB has actually got FNB Stadium. That's how big they are into the sports environment. So I thought, okay, well, maybe if we leave sport in, Capitec is going to be a bit smaller because sport is not core business, or sponsorship is not core business, it's awareness. So I even removed sports at a point, and then it was just like a ridiculous measurement. So I put sport back in, right? So now we've got all of FNB Stadium mentions. So, and that's not really publicity in my mind, but okay, we're going to take it. And then I looked, well, what does Capitec sponsor? And the truth is they don't sponsor anything. The things they do is they do CSI drives, so corporate social investment, corporate social responsibility drives. So what they'll do is they'll build houses, they'll mentor, they'll put out bursaries, that sort of thing. But they don't actually piggyback on any other big brand for their volume to be so big. So that's why I wanted to know, well, how did you go from loose change to Graceland? And that's the answer we're going to make today. And how do we find that answer? Well, Acumen Media uses a set of technology that monitors a full media spectrum and includes online and social media. And it listens to over 150 million sites in 175 countries in over 150 languages. So it's got a pretty big reach. The system allows us to identify hotspots and talking points that are affecting your brand and your industry. It also helps you identify the right and the wrong influences on your brand, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. It looks about the sentiment that is relevant to your brand and also topics that are related to your brand. It looks at your competitors and what they were doing at the time and whether they performed well or not. And then we ascertain what drives this so-called pride about Capitec. So with that all in mind, I've put together a deck that I'm going to take you through and show you how the system works, firstly, and how we've defined where Capitec's volume's coming from, and are they really the best bank in South Africa and even the world. I'm just going to switch screens. There we go. Right, so what I've done, this is the Acumen Media set of technology. I'm just going to move you guys across to the right, to the left. You'll see here I've put in a banking study, and I've got Standard Bank, Netbank, Capitec, Absa, and FNB. I've asked the system to bring back 30 days worth of data so that we can just get an idea over a month how these guys are performing. So the first one I've got here on display is Standard Bank, and we can see that they have like some peaks and valleys in their data. There's not like a consistent line. One big peak happened here on the 20th and 21st of October. And if we click on it, the system's now going to tell me what Standard Bank did here that gave them such a big spike. So as an analyst, the first thing I'm noticing is lots of radio station names. Okay, these are the posts. But if you scroll down, you'll see there's lots of radio stations with the same image. So very quickly, I can tell that these guys had a radio campaign across various radio outlets, linked or not linked, and it was about Gagazi's Investment Day. Gagazi's Investment Day, and then they had East Coast Radio Investment Day, and then Jacaranda Investment Day. So they tailor-made it for each radio station. These smiley faces show me that it was pretty positive, what came out of that. And what it does tell me, if you look at Standard Bank's graph, it's the biggest peak in the month. So partnering with radio stations and making your conversation bespoke really does work. So the biggest peak is that. Can then add Netbank to the mix. So I've just clicked on Netbank, and now you're going to see the green line added to the data. And you're also going to start understanding the share of voice. So 63% of the data, if we look at both of them, belongs to Netbank. So they've got quite a much larger share of voice than Standard Bank. In fact, almost double. If we look at theirs, the peaks, they peak and valley, peak and valley, peak and valley a lot quicker than Standard Bank does. Their biggest story was here. This was around the 22nd and 23rd. And if we drill down to that, we're starting to see something very interesting. There were several campaigns. Firstly, they had a campaign called Netbank Unlock Me. It's an account where you put in $50, and after you've used it 5 times, don't know how you can use $50 5 times, but anyway, you can start winning monthly prizes. Okay, it was very well received, Unlock Me. But what was even more well received was the way they launched it, and that was at the Youth X Live Summit. In fact, some people said that Netbank are the only bank that are really focusing on the youth, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So then we add Absa, okay, and the data grows. Now we find Absa is the biggest out of these 3 by 1%, just over 1%, and largely because of what happened here, right? So if we drill down into that, we can see, okay, there's a lot of Absa stuff here, and there's a lot of Absa Summer of I Can. So this was this is a banking app campaign, and a lot of people saying like you can't get caught without being able to pay for money because now you just need the app. Okay, so this went very well as well. In fact, it was 2,300 results of their 13,000 results. So that's almost it's almost 10%, or close to 20% of their volume was that campaign. So it worked very well for Absa. Then we add FNB. Okay, and this where it becomes really fascinating. So FNB, and I'm just going to shade out the other line so that you can see. FNB have a consistent conversation. So where we looked at someone like Netbank, the peaks and valleys, FNB seemed to sort of keep it on the level. They had one big story, which was this one here, that trumped other peaks at the time. If we click on it, we can see that their focus is now on affordable banking. It's about bank charges, specifically for businesses. They're looking at Bank Zero or business zero accounts, competing with Bank Zero, and also about how to save money, what sort of promotions are out there. So they're very consumer focused on saving the Medibas. Okay. If we now add Capitec, watch how this graph changes. Everybody is morphed. So where we had it off and we were seeing these peaks and valleys, they now become so small. And Capitec really owns the conversation, specifically in the beginning of November. If we have a look at the share of voice, they come in with 35% against their market peers. I mean, Standard Bank drops to 9% when we're comparing them on the same chart. So the first thing is, well, what on earth happened here that resulted in 8,000 results, or almost 9,000, which is more than Standard Bank got in the whole month, right? I've drilled down into this. It's quite a big one to drill down into, but I'll tell you what made this is overall, people are waiting for a Capitec crash, or they are worried that their money isn't safe. It was sort of a perfect storm at the end of the month, because you also had a woman who went into a Capitec branch and she took all her clothes off and she said she had an issue with bank fees or repayment on her loan. There was also a Capitec customer that had a 500 Rand query, and he came in and he got very angry. And the security guards, his name is Mr. Gumede, the security guards at that Capitec branch in Tongaat beat him to death. So that happened. And then their app also went down. So it was almost a perfect storm for Capitec this year. But what it resulted in, the most engaging post over that period was this one. Your next task is to keep clients' money safe. And we can go read this tweet. It was a big one. So by just clicking on it, I'm now going to be able to see it. For those of you who seen Squid Games, this picture will come as no surprise. And it's quite a humorous tweet, right? But when we start, like, a lot is hidden in humor in South Africa. And when we start looking at the replies, we're looking at things that people are saying, oh, they charged me 70 Rand just to deposit. It says, this one says, there isn't one who doesn't drive us crazy, right? Another person saying about depositing money, their prices went up. Someone I know lost over 2K. Something is going on. Keep our money safe is all that we ask. So we're starting to get an idea. It's negative. Like where we're talking about Capitec morphing everybody else, they are at the moment, but according to this stuff, it's pretty negative. Let's go and see how this tweet impacted on their brand. So now I've just taken this one post, the Squid Games post, and I'm having a look at how it moved across the world. And you'll see, firstly, I can tell straight away that this is not paid for influencers. And that is because the story extends over a period. And also, I've got the bubbles that where it's tweeted to are quite big when they respond. So the larger the bubble, the more responses you got. So I can now drill down and say, well, what was it that gave me that 20 results and who said it? And then I'll drop down with who retweeted or who else had something to say. So far, pretty negative. If we look at the entire group, there's 82,000 posts, 82,000 results. What is a result? A result is a unique post. Where does that unique post come from? It comes from news media, from online blogs and forums, from social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn if you have a token. And then it also comes from TikTok. And there's quite a bit that comes from TikTok. We just started doing TikTok. We can add into this print and broadcast. That's absolutely feasible for Acumen to do. But when you start dealing with volumes of 82,000, print and broadcast sort of becomes secondary, okay? But we can do it. So let's look at what was the most engaging. The most engaging post in the set of data is from Pamela Matanga. It's talking about the YouthX Summit this past weekend. Now, if I check how that moved, you're going to find that this was paid. Okay, how do I know? Because it went out to all the right people, and then that didn't work. So then we started again, and it went out again. So you can see the timeline on the 5th, and then the timeline on the 9th. This might have been a preamble to the event, and this might have been during the event itself. It probably is. But you can see that it doesn't really go anywhere apart from here. The bubbles are small, right? Which is very different to what we just saw. This next tweet, and this is the last one I'm going to do virality on, is Dear FNB and Capitec account holders, it's almost festive. Move your bonus money to safer banks. Now, that's a pretty harsh tweet. Let's see how that moved. And now you're looking at true virality. Sorry, it takes a minute because it's quite a bit of work. There we go. So now you'll see how big and viral this post was. And this is when somebody just writes something and all of a sudden it starts to trend. In fact, this is one of the reasons Capitec started trending. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, we've understood now the level of results. We're concerned that, yes, even though they morph, there seems to be quite a bit of negativity. Let's go and have a look at the performance of the brands. So the system now tells us where they placed their media or got media presence by both reach and engagement. So let me explain the metrics. Engagement is when you go onto News24 and you write a comment. That's an engagement. You go into News24 and you share an article. That's an engagement. You go on Twitter and retweet, that's an engagement. Or you create a post on Facebook, that's an engagement. Okay. Reach is how many potential points that data could have been picked up at. So if Tonya has 1,000 followers, there's potentially 1,000 data points where you could have seen my message. Doesn't mean you did see it. Just means that there's 1,000 points where it could have been seen. Now, when we start looking at our banking study, this is when it becomes fascinating. So Capitec have got 29,000 results, but their reach sits at 744 million, and their engagement at 94,000. We look at FNB, their reach is 1.5 billion, and their engagement is 46,000. So they have a higher reach and a lower engagement. What that means to me as a media analyst is that the likelihood is FNB is using a lot of news media. So they're hitting the high numbers when it comes to reaching the public, but the message doesn't encourage people to share. Whereas Capitec are getting results from social media, which is why they're having a low reach, but they have a huge level of engagement because that's how social media works. So it's interesting also to see that Netbank and FNB are sort of neck to neck on the engagement rate, but Netbank's doing a lot less on the reach. So in fact, FNB can drop its big reach and it'll be getting the same results as Netbank when it comes to the case of engagement. Then we may want to see, okay, how do they fit as a share of engagement? And when we're talking about, so before we were talking about results, now we're talking about how many people engaged. And in this instance, 94,000 people engaged with Capitec, or 94,000 messages returned on what was a base of 28,000. And then Netbank becomes the second largest rather than FNB with 46,000. So when we're looking at volume, Capitec may be the biggest and FNB the second largest. But when we look at engagement, the picture changes. Then we look at who. So who was behind this? And this is a very powerful part of our tool, is it allows you to identify those people that are doing good by you or those people that really don't like you very much. So firstly, you can see by the number of unique authors, Capitec's got more authors than anyone else, but we've already established that they sit on social media a lot. So we would expect more authors there. It was interesting to me to see that Standard Bank has only 3,500 authors. And is being, if we look at the study, it turns out that them and Netbank are really classified as the better banks amongst the lot, but we'll get there. Then we have a look at the influencers. So I want to take you to this one. This is the influencers for Capitec. Now it gives you a whole bunch of metrics, but for this case study, I want to look at who's talking about Capitec and why. So I've just switched the data set to engagement. And you can see here that Lady M has a lot of negative stuff to say about Capitec and gets 7,500 people actually working, like actually doing something to that post. She also has a reach of 74,000, so about 10%. 1 in every 10 of her followers actually responded on this issue. Now, we may want to say, well, look, I don't know who she is, and what does she say about us? So by clicking here, we now get to understand who that author is. So it'll give you a bio about who she is, where she lives, if she puts that up there, what sort of posts she puts out, what sort of followership she has, and then what she's writing about Capitec. And she has a little bit of a vendetta. Something happened to this poor girl, because if you have a look at the back, almost 80% of her conversation about Capitec is negative. So as Capitec, she's had such a big impact that she's created 7,600 people to respond. That's a lot of people And you should engage with her and see what exactly the problem is and how you can help. Because you don't want her saying that people are going to lose their festive money if they bank with Capitec. I mean, I would assume that's just a fallacy. And that thought process is there because Capitec originally started with zero bank fees, and then they introduced these heavy bank fees. So there is a lot of distrust there. Let's also remember that we've had some crucial banking stories in our country where we found that banks just disappear overnight. So there is a big problem for Capitec in the narrative that they should be addressing. And let's go drill down into that sentiment. So the system looks at positive and negative stuff and also neutral. And that's fine. Like, it's telling me Capitec has a 24% positive perception and a 22% negative perception. Showing me also Absa's got a lot better perception despite the Sipa Pajana story. That's what's sitting in there. But then, you know, we're looking at these and we're like, okay, that's fine. But what does it mean? And here is what it means. Over time, if your benchmark was 0, so 0 being neutral, and plus 100 being the most positive and minus 100 being the most negative, this is where the banks stand. Standard Bank comes up as the most positive across social media and news media over the 30-day period. In fact, they are plus 72%. The other number that's really interesting is underneath it. This is an increase from last month of 186%. So they were sitting at about 30, maybe 25 last month. Capitec, the loose change to Graceland guys, comes in with 4%. So they are the lowest net sentiment brand out of these banks. This shows us a little bit about when the reputation dips and valleys. And let's just put Capitec on the screen, and you can see they were doing okay. Not brilliant, because we shouldn't have these dips. But here is when they took a crash. And it was a big crash, and it's back again, and then it's back again. So right now, I would say there's almost a crisis in the communications on Capitec. If we look at someone like Standard Bank, you'll see they're always aiming for the very high echelon there of sentiment. They had one dip here, but it was small. Then we might want to understand, well, what words drove people to this negative sentiment, specifically for Capitec? So the system starts isolating words that were positive and negative out of the data. And it's very, very clear that the death of Mr. Gumede at the Tongaat branch made very big news and very negative news on the left-hand side of this page. And when we look at the right-hand side, we can see like there's Live Better, Partners, benefits, etc., that come on the right-hand side. So these are more positive. We can change this to hashtags. Now we start seeing which hashtags made an impact on them. Let's just go for Capitec, sorry. So you can see here on the left, justice for the death of Mr. Gumede becomes a very big story. Also, voting came into it. There's quite a few voting and election results coming into these particular hashtags. You'll also see that I Can with Absa comes into the Capitec data set. So there's obviously nice comparisons going on around the market. Capitec itself sitting in neutral territory, little bit on the side of positive. So you can drill down and see, well, what is it that made that particular post by going into the results. We're not going to do that now. Then we look at who are these people? what are they into? What are they interested in? What is their gender? What is their age range, etc.? And if we put them all together, we'll start understanding that, and I found this demographic quite interesting, is that on gender, most people do have a 50-50 split. I mean, there's a couple here and there, you know, Capitec being one with a bit of a male bias, but there's a nice gender split, right? Also interesting to see is the age groups. 18 to 24 is one of the biggest age groups for Netbank and Absa. It's, however, one of the smaller age groups for FNB and for Capitec. A lot of their conversation focusing on 25 to 34-year-olds, or being responded by 25 to 25 to 34-year-olds. 35 plus to 44, also a large chunk of the conversation. And then they forget about people like me. So there's no conversation for us here. And I found that strange, specifically outside of Capitec for the other banks. We can also look at what do they do for a living? What are they interested in? So, I mean, the top interests amongst everybody who talks about this study is family and parenting. We care about our family and we care about our kids especially. Also very concerned about our education. We love a bit of social media. And we are keen on sport, which makes sense for those that are sports sponsors to do what they do. We're also keen on music and audio, which makes sense for banks that have music partnerships with radio stations to do what they do. And then when we look at the occupations, lots of entrepreneurs and lots of students. In fact, a big majority of them are, which then makes it very clear that what Nedbank did with the youth and in entrepreneurship is very important. What FNB is doing about zero rating your first business and the bank charges is very important because most of the audience sits there. Most of them are parents, so being cognizant of the children is absolutely important. And then we can have a look at where they are. So this is where the system gets a little bit big brother. And I'll talk to you in a minute about where this data comes from and why you don't have to be too scared. But I have one piece of advice. Guys, turn your location off, please. If you turn your location off, I can't see this stuff. But as we're in Joburg, I'm going to zoom in on Joburg. There's 28,000 people talking in Joburg, 10,000 results to Capitec, and then the rest between 2,000 and 6,000. Can drill down on that. Right, now we're starting to understand that Absa has a really big share of voice when it comes to Joburg town. So does Capitec, and Nedbank not bad at all. Joburg North seems to love a bit of Nedbank. And then if we look at Pretoria, there's quite a bit for Absa. Okay, we can drill down even further. Sorry. So I can go drill down on this particular person here that's writing about Netbank, just to show you that it's quite big brother. That person lives just off Northway Road, and I can go and see the results of what they posted. Okay, and it's about the Nedbank Cup. So why is this relevant? It's relevant if you have a large network of outlets across the country. It'll identify immediately where your sentiment is. So we can very quickly turn this to sentiments, and we can just look at Capitec, and you're going to see a different picture, highlighting exactly where they have service delivery issues. So you can see here in Randfontein, like a large chunk of that stuff is negative. When we look in Benoni, there's a big problem there, also a quarter of it negative. When we start looking here in Irene, good quarter of it is negative. So they may want to then deal with those branches or find out what the problem is in those areas. We've done this type of study. Before I go there, I'll talk to you about what we've done before. The last thing I want to show you is just the use of logos and placings. This is quite cool. It's really good for those of the banks that do sponsorship. So it looks nicely for sports, starts telling you where you see logos on shirts, etc., etc. So this is the most engaging posts by visual. And this is whether they were inside or outside, a lot of outdoor posts. And then we can look at the top scene. So there's that beautiful Netbank picture. And we can see that that made a big impact. In fact, it was one of the top scenes on the youth, on the data set for this youth summit. Really did work well, the youth summit. We could also look at objects, not really relevant for banking, but certainly relevant for fast food. I can tell you what we found in those pictures. So that's an overview of what goes on in the banking sector. We don't just do this, though. We wrap it up in a report. And what I've just discussed with you is we will drill down and find the so-called golden nuggets that are relevant for the client. And then we build a report around that. It can be used, the tool itself is very simple and simple and easy to use, and it can be used for various different things. One thing I haven't showed you, and if you just give me one gracious moment, is I just want to show you the channel analytics. Because when you're performing within your own channel, and I'm steering a little bit away from Capitec now, I just want to show you, let's go for Steer South Africa. This is the type of metrics we can get out of the system for your own channel. So Capitec's own Instagram channel, right? We would be measuring their followers, views, reach, impressions. We can even measure from here advertising, okay? And we can see what the owner did and when they work. Let's go back 30 days. I don't want my Steers client to feel bad. You can see when the owner worked, what hours, and then you can see when the audience reacted. So if your timing is even out, the system will tell you your audience and the owner are not correlated, where in this instance they really are. It'll also tell you who the influencers were, their sentiment, where they are, what visual insights, and then it also looks at the page and how much money you spent on advertising and whether that worked. So that is an overview of the banking industry in South Africa and also a drill down into Capitec. I would like to take questions if there are any at this point.
So we haven't had any questions on the chat as yet.
Oh, good. Does that mean you're all half asleep, or does that mean you enjoyed it?
Okay, we've got one from JP.
Dean's clapping. Thank you, Dean.
JP has asked, where is all of this data collected from?
Very good question, and thank you. I meant to elaborate on the GDPR, POPI Act, etc. So firstly for social media, each social media organization has an API or a pipe to their data, okay, that you have to buy. So we have arrangements and legal agreements with Facebook and its properties. So that's Facebook, Instagram, and soon to be Meta, who knows? Meta better be better. And then we have agreements with Twitter. We have agreements with LinkedIn, where we've got agreements with TikTok, but their API is a little bit unstable at the moment, so we get some data, not all. And then we crawl the open domains. So we use sophisticated spiders, and they go and crawl news sites, blog sites, forums, all that sort of thing. So that goes across the planet. The POPI Act and the GDPR are very important to us. So when they said delete Facebook in 2018, I know we've just had it again now, but in 2018 there was a big delete Facebook story and Zuckerberg had to go to court. At that time, the GDPR compliance came into effect. So it was actually almost 4 years ago now. And then all APIs were built and you had to pay for the API from the supplier. So everything you see here is with the permission of those providers and also with the permission of the consumer, because you opt in. Whereas for news and blogs and forums, those are open domains, so we crawl them. Where there's royalties that are required to be paid to journalists, that is done through the agreement with the crawler. So that's where the data comes from. And as I said, there's 150 million sites in our system. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Super interesting.
Yay, glad you liked it.
Terrifying though, to be honest. That's interesting.
Well, depends on if you're using it. If you're using it, it's not so terrifying.
Yeah,
your competitors might be a bit worried.
Yvonne wants to know if we can see how synthesis is doing.
Yes, I'm not sure we can. The word synthesis, just give me a minute. I'm going to share screen. The word synthesis is probably going to bring me back a bit of junk. So this is the back end of the system. So I'll show you how this works. Synthesis. And I'm just going to go for the word synthesis and source country ZA. And I can go and have a look now before I send it to clients or before I go through. You see, like, I'm getting a lot of, there's some collagen. Yeah, there's a lot that aren't relevant to you and some that definitely are. So in this situation, to answer the question, we would make sure that the code is refined in such a way that you don't get junk. I'll show you how we do that. This is, we do work for the Department of Social Development, SASA, and you can just imagine, like, the level of, firstly, negativity about the brand is pretty rough. I'm just waiting for it to load. It's pretty rough, and then the other thing is there's a huge volume that they didn't create. So for them, it's very important to only get out what they created. Just waiting for the system to load. So what we do is we build exclusions. Another one is with VW. They don't want every accident, every hijacking, every, I don't know, second-hand car that's on the market. So we build exclusions for that particular, for that purpose. So I'll show you here. It's just loaded. Let me show you the exclusions here. So this is for DSD, the Department of Social Development. And if I just go into their topics, oh, I'm not there. Sorry. Well, in fact, I can do it for VW. It's fine. Sorry. I'm here anyway. So I've asked the system to bring back Volkswagen in source country of South Africa, but underneath it, I've removed for sale, dealer, dealership, deal, price, and a whole bunch of other words that will make sure that when I get back the stuff for VW, that it's only actually the corporate stuff for VW and about their products. It's not about every person who had an accident in a Polo, and it's not about every Golf that went missing, you know, and every robbery that took place in a VW vehicle. So we build exclusions, and we would do the same for synthesis. With synthesis, though, I would say that it's probably best to add your channels. So like we did on I showed you on Instagram for steers, we would do the same for synthesis, because you are very much an online presence as far as social media is concerned, and that would be unfair to just show you that and not give you the full picture.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We do.
Yes,
Hugo.
I see the platform is called Talkwalker. Yes. So Talkwalker is the people who have the API and the license with these suppliers across the world. And we bought the license in South Africa. The license is quite expensive. So the things with you could deal with Talkwalker yourself direct. You're welcome to. The only thing is, firstly, it's charged in dollars. So that's quite hefty before you even start, or actually euros now. And secondly, you have to pay upfront for the year. So it becomes a big whack of money. We find with clients that they want to be able to say, you did a good job this month, and next month say you didn't do a good job, you know? They don't want to have to commit to a year. I mean, there's some other people out there that make you commit for 3 years. But so we don't make anyone commit for any period of time. You can take a month's service, you can take an event service, you can take a year's contract, and what that will do is guarantee you the rate, but there's always an escape clause of a 30-day notice period if you don't like what we do. The other thing is, Talkwalker is just the platform. And if you saw in the beginning of the study, one would have thought Capitec really was a Graceland. The truth is they're not. The truth is they are a big bank, but they have some very serious negative conversation surrounding the bank. And we find that information by having an experienced analyst behind your data. So if you had to come across as a client, we sell a managed solution. So, and this is maybe the best time to show you this one, which is this here. This is how we manage the Talkwalker solution. Firstly, we will make sure that you are alerted daily and that you have the automated side of the business, which is what you saw working here. If something negative breaks, we will send you an alert. Now, that alert can be in any format. We can email you if you prefer. I like to use WhatsApp or Telegram groups so that you get someone's immediate attention. And we do this very well, specifically for clients that often come into the firing line, like the fast food industry, like the big banks. I mean, we have a couple of banks already on our system. The other thing is we allow you access to the dashboards that you saw working there, and not only on your computer, but you can pick it up on your mobile through a link. So it becomes very easy to start playing with your data. We do all media, so it's not just social and online. We also do print and broadcast, and we can instantly refine that data. This is when we talk about managed solution. So for example, Mr. Gamede's death, we can isolate that incident completely and give a dashboard just for that incident. Or we can remove that conversation from the data and show you the rest of the conversation if that's what the client requires. The other thing, and this is a really big winner, is we ingest other content. So if you have sales data, if you have market research data outside of what's happening on the media landscape, if you have client service performance data, KPIs, ad spend, all of that can be ingested into the system and measured against itself. And that sort of brings us to utopia. Like if you can tell, I mean, there's that famous saying, I know half my advertising is working, I just don't know which half. Well, this system will now tell you which half, you know. Then the other thing is the dashboards that we present to you are updated instantly. Like 0.02 seconds is the slowest our system will pick up a post that has just been published. The dashboards can be set at intervals that work for you, but we generally sell them at every 15 minutes it updates. And then once a month, we do a report. So, and this is where a senior analyst, like what we've done today, goes through that data and then puts that into a document to measure your performance against that of your competitors. So in a nutshell, our man solutions read and evaluate your data every single day. In fact, it's 4 times a day on any client. They do this for several reasons. Like sometimes the machine sentiment isn't accurate. It is a machine after all, you know, so we make sure the sentiment's accurate. Sometimes you get stuff that's not relevant. I mean, we do work for PASA, which is Payroll Association of South Africa, but also Petrol Association of South Africa. So when they bring up PASA in a post, sometimes it might not be right, you know, and then we'll make sure that that's accurate. If there is something wrong, we will adjust the keywords. If there is a crisis, or perhaps there's a big brouhaha about something that you did really well, we will alert you in real time with a dashboard, with themes, with trends and comments that are interesting to your brand about that situation. We do this through managed WhatsApp groups and our Telegram groups where the links are dropped and you can quickly change strategy so that that particular conversation works for you. And then we use the software to predict forthcoming changes. And we did that now in the Capitec study. I mean, we can see that people are worried about where they're putting their money, you know, and we could actually pinpoint, and you saw that too, the butterfly effect and recommended strategic changes while we measure the impact of what's going on in the market. And then we deliver the consolidated reports I spoke to you about, and we consult with you on strategy changes that we think might be relevant. There's a couple of references, and I'm happy to share the deck with you after this. But yeah, that's really our story in a nutshell.
Thank you so much.
So welcome. Thank you.
So interesting.
Yay.
Does anybody have any other questions? You're welcome to just unmute yourself as well.
It's Yvonne speaking. It's been very, very fascinating. I think a bit of a information overload, which is why we're quiet.
That's okay. That's okay. As long as it got the message across.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Thank you, Yvonne. Val, I think we're good, hey?
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for coming and sharing that amazing knowledge with us and the information. Really fascinating and interesting to see. For everyone else on the call, I have included the form, the feedback form in the chat. If you wouldn't mind completing that for us, please. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful day further. Happy Wednesday.
Belinda. Thanks so much for this opportunity, Belinda. We really appreciate it. It's lovely to interact with you guys. I wish you a very, very good rest of the week, rest of the month, rest of the year. And hope to speak to you at some point in the near future.
Thank you so much.